What is Ofcom? Who are they? What do they do? And what is their role within cancel culture? So recently the name Ofcom has come up regarding either the investigation or the cancellation of right-wing or conservative media companies and personalities. Ofcom also say they are impartial. Now, they're meant to be the UK's main regulatory body, and they're meant to oversee and make sure that television companies, media companies, etc. are all staying within the guidelines and being fair. Now, even though that's their job, I don't think they're sticking to it. I don't think they are fair, and I think they are biased. Now, I've seen many comments on social media and my own channel comment section telling me that Ofcom won't spring into action unless they've had a certain number of complaints. Well, that's half true, but if you go to Ofcom's website, they state themselves that Ofcom can also launch investigations without needing to receive a complaint from a viewer or listener. And because Ofcom operates within their own set of rules, I think their recent inactions against left-wing celebrities on left-wing television programmes and mainstream media organisations prove they're anything but impartial. Now, as you know, Ofcom are in the middle of investigating Russell Brand. They're also in the middle of investigating GB News, and that was before the Lawrence Fox palaver. They are also trying their best to regulate X, or formerly Twitter, owned by Elon Musk. Now, thanks to the Online Harm Bill, or Online Safety Bill, which was passed on the 19th of September this year, but has yet to have royal assent, and I think that's happening very, very soon. That will mean that social media companies that operate in Britain or air in Britain will fall under Ofcom. That makes them completely at Ofcom's mercy. And the only reason Ofcom didn't do anything about Rumble when they told Caroline Dinenage MP where to go after her threatening letter is purely because the Online Harm Bill hasn't had royal assent and made into law. But I promise you, Ofcom will be all over Rumble like a rash. And they will be told to kick off, demonetise and cancel Russell Brand and others. Or they will get cancelled here. The app wouldn't be available. That's how they work. Now, as I've just told you, Ofcom are heavily involved with GB News and Rumble, but they've done absolutely nothing, not even off their own backs, because they can, when it comes to controversy presented by left-wing woke television and media companies like the BBC, Channel 4, Sky News, etc. Because back in 2019, Joe Brand joked about throwing acid over Nigel Farage on the BBC. No further action was taken. In 2020, Sophie Dukes joked about killing white people, kill whitey, she said, on Frankie Boyle's New World Order television show. No further action. In 2020 again, Miriam Margoyle said she wanted Boris Johnson to die live on television while he was seriously ill with that virus we're not allowed to talk about. No further action. And this year, Chris Packham made an advert for his television programme on Channel 4 calling for people to break the law. He said it was the responsible and ethical thing to do to break the law. Ofcom, not a peep from them. And this is purely political. You see, the people who run Channel 4 and the BBC, etc., and the left-wing celebrities, Joe Brand, Sophie Dukes, Miriam Margoyles, Chris Packham, they all hold the same political ideology and views as those in Ofcom, as I'm about to tell you. Now, there are 10 points here. I'm going to elaborate them, but they were initially put on X by an account called The Right Angle, so credit where it's due. And these points should highlight and prove to you that Ofcom are indeed a very partial and biased organisation, and it needs reform. So the first point is the BBC are uniquely allowed to manage their own complaints under a system called BBC First. Now, this is a system where out of more than 450,000 complaints, only 18 were upheld in 2021. So how the hell the BBC, a state broadcaster, are allowed to regulate themselves is just, that's alarm bells in itself, isn't it? Point number 2. Ofcom's boards and committees are loaded with ex-BBC staffers. The latest publicly available register of interest has 16 BBC interests registered. Now, in my opinion, Ofcom should have absolutely no one from any other media or broadcaster on their board or in their employ. And this is a massive, massive conflict of interest, surely. Point number 3, Ofcom actually have board and committee members who hold shares in a company they regulate, which is ITV, by the way. What does that tell you? Putting it in a register of interest doesn't diminish the shock value, which is just... I mean, that's another alarm bell, isn't it? Conflict of interest, big time. Now, GB News' audience has been trouncing all the competition, BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Sky News, the lot. Of course, they don't want competition, and if they've got ex-staffers in Ofcom, then everything is in place really to get rid of the competition, isn't it? Put 2 and 2 together, folks. Point number 4, the average package of Ofcom staff is a £60,000 a year salary. And that's in the annual report, by the way. This is more than the average in investment banking. Now, for a bunch of people who produce nothing, and Ofcom doesn't produce a product. It's nothing. It's just a regulatory body that tells people off, which tells me they look after each other. Scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And that's a hell of a lot of money. Point number 5, there are no representatives from the smaller stations or channels on any Ofcom board or committee. It's loaded with staff from channels such as the big guns, Sky News, BBC, Channel 4, etc. And again, just a point, this is in order for them to completely crush the opposition or the competition, and it's working. Point number 6, and get this, the current chair of Ofcom was found by none other than Labour Party friend and lackey Sue Gray. Now, Sue Gray was, of course, the alleged impartial investigator into the so-called Boris Johnson Tory party Downing Street Partygate. But then it turns out, before that, she was asked to work for the Labour Party by Keir Starmer. When Keir Starmer was pressed about this by Nick Ferrari on LBC, he couldn't answer, or he refused to answer. So make of that what you will. Point number 7, Ofcom seem unable to spot brigading when it happens. Now, 7,300 complaints about Lawrence Fox, when the figures for that particular show, Dan Wootton on GB News, was far lower, which suggests to me that well over half of those complainants weren't even watching the show. They're just people who hate Dan Wootton, GB News, Lawrence Fox, heard about it on social media and then rang Ofcom. And that's how they got those numbers. Point number 8, Ofcom promised an inquiry into complaints made by the family of Nicola Bewley of harassment by ITV and Sky News. It never happened. But I promise you, if the family of Nicola Bewley made a complaint to Ofcom about GB News or the Daily Mail or Talk Radio, then Ofcom would have been over them like a rash. Which leads to point 9, attempts to get information about the inquiry into the Nicola Bewley allegations have been stonewalled. Freedom of information requests have been resisted at every turn. So why the hell would Ofcom refuse to hand over information into the inquiry of an unsolved murder? You tell me. And lastly, point 10, there is a revolving door between Ofcom committees and boards and the people they regulate. So basically seats at the top table for the BBC, ITV, BT, etc. So it's no wonder really that government ministers and parliamentary committee members don't rock the boat, because when their political careers are over, they could potentially have jobs there, so best keep them sweet, isn't it? So there we go, no wonder the new name for Ofcom is Off Communists, and rightly so. And again, all these points were made by X or Twitter account, The Right Angle. I've just elaborated on it, and I hope it helps you guys to understand what Ofcom really is, which is a highly biased and political machine that exists only to silence opposition, and that's it. It's that basic, and I think it needs to be abolished. And there we go, that's my tuppence. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and until the next time, have a great weekend, and Roger Trout.